Today we're going to be saving Solidworks images, and I'm going to show you two different methods. One is what I call the rough draft quality, which just produces a simple JPEG similar to what you see on your screen, and another is a rendered image, which is a high quality image that takes into account things like real surface textures, surface decals, things like that. So we're going to start with the easy one, just the rough draft quality. You may have already figured this one out on your own. Basically, you can get your image in your screen how you'd like to see it, maybe something like that. Go to File, Save As, and you can choose to save as something else. So something else could be, if you're 3D printing, it could be an STL, or if you just want to save a graphics file, you could save a JPEG, or here's another one I see, a TIFF. There's probably a few more in here, a PNG file. So lots of different formats that we can save. Let's just go with a JPEG for today. And I always like to check out options whenever I have something that I can choose options for. So I'm going to go over here to options and just see what's inside here. And we go in here and we can see that for a file format of a TIFF, a PSD, JPEG, and PNG, we've got these options here. So I'm just going to scoot this over so you can see it a little bit. We can see our object in the background. So first thing it's telling us is image type. So our options are black and white, RGB, full color, and grayscale. So I guess this depends on your application and what you actually want to see. Do you want to see a black and white? Do you want to see some grays in there? Do you want to see full color? For today, let's just go full color. Next down here is some options. Perhaps if you were saving a TIFF file, you could do something different here, but we're saving a JPEG, so we don't have that option today. There's a checkbox here that's grayed out for us for JPEG. We can remove the background. That might be really good for something like a PNG. That might come in really handy if you're trying to, let's say, Photoshop your Solidworks part or assembly into another picture. That's really helpful. Next thing down on the list is JPEG compression. So you want it low compression, high compression. So high compression means low quality, low compression means high quality. In modern 2021 computers, your computer can handle a lowly compressed JPEG, so no big deal there. Maybe the biggest option here is the screen capture or print capture. And the reason I showed you the screen in the background is because I wanted you to see the difference there. So screen capture, that will capture literally everything that's happening on the screen. Print capture picks out a certain range of pixels, and it'll capture everything that happens in those range. So that is determined by the paper size that you choose down here. So if you're choosing a different particular shape of paper, you're going to get a different shape of picture in the end. So an A size landscape, that's fine. I think that's just a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that you're used to from a paper printer. DPI is also very important, so that's dots per inch. So we want to save high quality images usually. High quality means higher file size, so there is a bit of a trade-off. Whenever you're working with larger files, it's going to take you longer. So you can play around with this and see what you like. For demo purposes, I'll choose 600. And it's giving you a little warning there, but I think those are old warnings left over from early 2000s maybe, when SolidWorks was just beginning and file sizes were more difficult to work with. That's fine for us. So let's push OK. And I'm just going to save the JPEG here. I'm going to call it let's call this Hammer Rough Draft 1. Okay, so it took a few seconds to save. That's all it took. I'm going to open up that file so you can see what it looks like. Hammer Rough Draft 1. Oh, it looks like we had a little glitch happen here. I'm not really sure what happened there. Probably just a one-time glitch. But anyway, we can zoom in. We can see the quality of this image. It's pretty good. It's not perfect. If we chose something higher, like a 1200 DPI, when we were choosing DPI, it would look even better yet as we zoomed in. And if we chose something lower, it's going to look a little bit worse as we zoom in. But that's pretty good. That's basically a 1.5 megabyte file. Any computer can handle that, so not a big deal. So that's basically your rough draft quality. By the way, did you notice the background changed? It's now a white background. So if you really want to keep this background that you see in this picture, you might have to choose a different file format besides a JPEG. Okay, so that's easy enough. I think you can play around with that and figure that out. Not terribly concerned about that. Now, if you wanted to, you can change colors on here. You can change each file's material so that it has a material texture to it. You can do all of that, and that will save in this image too. So that's the rough draft quality. So let's move on to the photo rendering. And to do that, we're going to go up here and we're going to go to SolidWorks add-ins. And if you haven't already checked this Photo View 360, you should check that. When you check it, you should get another menu here that says Render Tools. So that's the one that we're going to be working in after this. Okay, so the thing that I like to do right away is I like to turn this Render Region button on. That basically just shows me the area that's going to be rendered when we actually do render our image. So let's just start off with that and see if we need to reposition our object or not. So let's make it just a little smaller so the whole thing fits in there. Yeah, that's fine. So if we go up in our windows, we can do some things like edit appearance. So that'd be where you're changing colors or changing textures of your individual parts. Edit the scene, which is the scene is your background. Decals, or you can consider that like a sticker that you stick on your object. Maybe you'd use it for a logo or something along those lines. Preview windows, we'll check out those in just a second. And perhaps the most important thing here to check out again is the options. And we can check out our options kind of similar to what we just saw in the last one where we're choosing sizes and things along those lines. Let's choose something that's kind of common, like 1920 by 1080. That's just HD resolution. So image format, yeah, let's just choose a JPEG again, that's fine. Preview render quality. So I don't find the preview to be terribly useful in most of the work that I do. The preview still takes quite a long time to render, and it typically doesn't look very good. It looks pretty ugly. The final render quality, so this is the file that we're actually making. So usually I'm willing to wait a little bit extra longer to make sure that I have a really good image. So I set that one at maximum. That'll make it take long, but it'll make it look the best. And then the preview, I set that at good. That is the lowest setting that I can choose. Basically, I don't look at that preview window at all, and I just kind of disregard it. Okay, if you go farther down, there's all kinds of other options related to how this image is going to be rendered. So these are things along the lines of, like, if you're a photographer, you probably understand these things fairly well. If you're an engineer, you probably do not. So what I would suggest doing is, if you don't like what your render quality is, then you start looking at some of these other options, and maybe you look them up as you go. Like, you figure out, like, well, what is gamma? Do a little Google search and see what gamma does, and maybe you'll learn that you need to increase or decrease your gamma, and that makes your image turn out better. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. For the most part, these images do turn out really nice on their own. So we'll close that options window. Okay, and our object, this hammer, kind of looks a little bit cartoonish to me with this big red head and a gray handle like that. So let's maybe try to make this look a little bit more realistic. This part is part of the hammer. I think these top parts are all part of the hammer head, and the very bottom one is the handle. Yeah, so everything from the bottom of this file to this file, they're all part of the hammer head. So I'm going to make those all the same material, and I'm just going to choose, by the way, you don't have to open the file and edit the material. You can go down here, right click on there, go to material, edit material, and you can choose whatever you want. I think hammers are most of the time made out of like a steel, like a 4340 or 4140, and it looks like I see 4340 on here. So I'm going to choose that and click apply. So that part name that I just changed is new 11. So anywhere I see a new 11, I've already changed that material. So new 11, here's a new 12. Let's change that material. We'll go find that same 4340 steel. There we go. New 12, new 12. We don't need to adjust these, they've already been adjusted. New 11 again, and then this one. We'll also make that out of 4340 steel. There we go. So now all of those parts, oh, did I miss one? Oh yeah, new 33. There we go. So new 33 will also get 4340 steel. There we go. And now new 44, that's the handle. So I want to make that a little bit more realistic. Maybe I'm going to make that out of a wood handle, let's say. So I think hammers are typically made out of like hickory or ash, the handles at least. So let's see if we have that as an option. We go down here into the woods category. Hickory and ash, I don't see that. I don't actually know what the next best wood species would be to choose for a hammer, so I'm just going to pick one at random. Let's choose oak. So there we go. There's our somewhat more realistic looking hammer, and let's get that kind of centered back in our box again. There we go. So I think we're ready to try doing a real rendering now. So let's go up here to this button that says Final Render. So we're going to push that. Off screen, off of my screen anyway, there is a preview window that opens up, and I'm sure this will happen to your screen too. You're going to get two windows, one that looks really nice, one that looks really slow and really fuzzy. I think they even say, oh, this one says Final Render, so it'll be pretty obvious the final render. And my preview window is currently not loading anything. It just looks like a few pixels of garbage. I think it will continue loading when the final render has been finished. So it depends on your settings that you're choosing. Your final render could be something that takes a few minutes, could be something that takes a few hours. So we've so far chosen some pretty low settings, so this should only be a couple minute process. So basically what it did was it went through and it did some rough calculations for these boxes of pixels, and then it got a little bit finer resolution. Then it went through one more time, it got a little bit finer resolution, and now when it goes through with these small squares, it's doing the final rendering. So it doesn't take it very long to figure out how to color and light all of those pixels out in the background where it's just basically white or gray or whatever that color is. It takes us much longer to figure out how to render the actual object that we chose. Okay, so that's done. On the right screen that you can't see, my preview window has finally picked up and it's starting to fill in some of those pixels. It still looks much, much uglier than this though. Okay, so that looks okay to me. You know what, let's save that and then let's open it up in a regular image viewer and see how that looks. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to save this as Hammer Render 1, just so we know what we're looking at. Okay, I'm going to open that up, Hammer Render 1. There we go. So you can see that we zoom in. It doesn't have the finest resolution, but you can see the colors and the texture look really real. That wood looks awesome. We've got some green that must be a reflection from the background. We've got some green here that must be some reflection from that background. So Solidworks does quite a bit of calculations in the background to create these images, and it's pretty amazing what it can do in such a short amount of time. So you also see that we've got a reflection here. You can see that it kind of looks like this thing is sitting on a piece of glass or a really low reflective mirror or something like that. Maybe you don't like that. There's ways you can get rid of that. So you can play around with some of those options and see what works for your situation. So we're going to do a few more just to have a little bit of practice at this and just get used to playing with some options. For the rest of them, the handle's kind of boring, so maybe let's just try to cut off most of the handle and focus in on the head. So let's try that, see how it goes. Alright, so this one, we can close this window. We're going to go back, make some changes, and then come back into the rendering screen. So when I close that, my preview window did not automatically close, and I'll show you what the preview window looks like. It looks like this. Now when I start moving this thing around, the preview window also changes. So it's going to slow your computer down some, and I can already tell that my computer is slowed down a little bit because it's constantly trying to do that preview on the right hand side of the screen. So I don't particularly need to see that so much, so I'm just going to close that preview window too. Now my computer should speed up again and we should be good to go. So first thing, we wanted to kind of focus in and just get mostly the hammer head itself and a little bit of the handle to show that nice wood texture. I'm not particularly a huge fan of this background, so I'm going to change the background for this next one. And I don't know, maybe we'll try something like that. I also like the plain white backgrounds. Typically when I'm making images, I'm putting them into a report or a presentation or a video. Almost always the colored backgrounds, even if it's just lightly colored like this, almost always that looks a little bit funny to me because I'm putting it into a report that has white pages, or I'm putting it onto a presentation that has a white background. So I usually go for just a plain white background, but that's totally up to you. It depends on your situation. They have some pretty crazy stuff in here, so you can do something like this as like a parking lot or something if you really wanted to show your object in there. I bet if you really wanted to, you could probably Google it and figure out how to do something like, if you were designing a moon rover, you could probably figure out how to put a real image of the moon in the background and put your rover right on top of it. So there's lots of stuff that you can do with this, and we're just really skimming the surface of what SolidWorks can do. Okay, that's a little bit of a strange one. I don't quite understand the title of that one. Let's go plain white. Oops, wrong one. Plain white. And let's get zoomed in back to where we were before. Something like that. That'll be fine. Let's go to options and let's just see what else we have inside there. So one thing, when we zoomed into that picture, it got a little bit blurry. We're not going to do this right now because it takes a long time, but the way that you could make that better is you could increase your resolution. So if you doubled both of these numbers, I don't know what those are, but if you doubled those, it would certainly get better. If you tripled it, quadrupled it, it would get better. So the bigger these numbers get, the more pixels your image has, the longer it's going to take to render, but the better it will look as you zoom in. So I don't know if that's important for your application or not. You'll have to figure that out as you go. What else can we do here? Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff here that you can do. I don't quite know about all that stuff, so I'm not going to mess with too much of it. We could cause more problems than we want. I think we did most of the stuff that I wanted to show you, so let's just do this one more time with a purely white background. Okay, we're getting our final render screen back up. Okay, and it's doing some rough calculations. 1 pixel per every, I don't know, 10 or 15 pixels. Now it's doing 2 every 10 or 15 pixels. Now it's doing probably 4. So it's doing some rough calculations right now, and then it's going to fill in all of those gaps in between those pixels that it hasn't calculated yet. Now you're going to notice that it does take some time to do really nice images like this, and if we increased our resolution, it would take a lot longer time. I think this render is going to take 1-2 minutes maybe. Earlier this summer I was doing a rendering, and it was a really high resolution rendering. The one frame of rendering took something like half an hour. So these can get really difficult and really complicated and take some time. So they have done a really nice thing. They've built in scheduling. So if you wanted to set up, let's say you want to set up 15 different images, maybe different parts that you're looking at, maybe it's different angles that you're looking at the same part, maybe it's got different backgrounds, different ways of lighting or different ways of providing shadow or reflection, and you wanted to try all those things, but you didn't want to sit there for half an hour and wait for each one. You can set them all up, have it set up in a schedule ready to go. You can have it run overnight while you're sleeping, and then the next morning you come back and you've got all 15 of your images ready to go. So this one's taking a little bit longer, it seems like. And there's also a progress bar up here. I don't know if you noticed that the first time, it maybe happened too quickly. But we've got a progress bar. The progress bar says we are 28% done. It's also estimating a total time of 5 minutes. So, that's fine. If you get to a point where you're tired of waiting and you want to go set up another image, you can just close this window and tell it that you want to schedule it for later, and it will take whatever progress it has made so far, temporarily save that progress, and then when you schedule it to come back, it'll pick up right from where it left off, and it will be done when you come back, I guess. Oh, so that wasn't total time. That must have been time remaining. Should go a lot faster now. We're almost through all of the hard solid material, and we just have mostly background left. Okay, there we go. We're almost done, and we're done. Alright, so let's save that image too. And we'll save that as hammer render number 2. We're going to go over here and look in here. So the amazing thing is that our file sizes are actually really small. Remember that rough draft we had? It was about 1.5 megabytes. These rendered images are 1/3 of a megabyte. So pretty impressive. So let's open up our second rendered image and check that out. That looks pretty neat to me. So you can zoom in, still looks pretty good. You can get really fine resolution renders like this, and there are some times where you cannot tell that that is not a picture taken of a real product, and I have some examples of those that I've found online over the years, and you put them side to side, you really cannot tell which one has been rendered and which one has an actual photo taken of a real product. So that's our photo rendering. Play around with it. It's a pretty fun little thing to do. There's our preview window. We can close that too. So play around with that, have some fun with that, and make beautiful pictures.